The shuttle Meridian died screaming through the atmosphere of designation Kithara 7, its hull plates peeling away like burning leaves. Christian gripped the controls as alarms shrieked around him, his sharp green eyes scanning readouts that painted an increasingly grim picture. The Deathworld's gravity well had snagged them during what should have been a routine navigation beacon repair, a simple job that had just become a fight for survival. Hull breach in sections 4 through 7, his co-pilot Angie called out, her hazel eyes reflecting the crimson warning lights. Her calloused hands worked the emergency systems with practiced efficiency, black hair whipping as the shuttle bucked. "We're coming in too steep." "I can see that," Christian muttered, his fingers dancing across the controls. A quick grin flashed across his scarred face despite their predicament. "But I've landed worse birds than this." The impact came like a thunderclap. Metal screamed against stone as the Meridian carved a smoking furrow across the ash-gray plains of Kithara 7. When the grinding finally stopped, silence fell, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the distant rumble of an approaching storm. Christian's head rang as he pulled himself from the pilot's seat, tasting blood. Through the cracked viewport, he could see their situation was worse than he'd hoped. Jagged spires of black rock stretched toward a bruised sky, and the air outside shimmered with an oily, corrosive quality that made his teeth ache just looking at it. "Angie?" He turned to find her already unbuckling, a thin line of blood trailing from her temple. "Alive," she confirmed, wiping the blood away with the back of her hand. "But we've got company." Through the twisted remains of the hull, Christian could see another crashed vessel, sleeker, clearly alien in design. Smoke poured from its ruptured sides, and he could make out figures moving weakly near the wreckage. As he watched, violet lightning split the sky, and the first drops of the corrosive storm began to fall. "Those things will be soup if they stay out there," Angie observed, her analytical mind already processing the threat. She rubbed her thumb against her fingers, a tell Christian had learned meant she was thinking fast. Without hesitation, Christian grabbed an emergency kit and headed for the airlock. "Then we get them." The storm hit as they reached the alien crash site. The rain burned like acid where it touched exposed skin, and the air carried a sour tang that made their eyes water. Christian ripped a section of hull plating free from their shuttle, holding it overhead as a makeshift shield, while Angie guided the alien survivors toward shelter. There were 4 of them, clearly different species. The largest was avian-like, all iridescent feathers and sharp talons, standing nearly 6 feet tall. Its yellow eyes fixed on Christian with obvious skepticism as it ducked under the improvised shelter. "Your kind lacks the endurance for this environment," the creature said, its voice melodic despite the condescension. Violet lightning reflected off its green-blue feathers. "We should have remained with our vessel." "Your vessel's on fire," Christian pointed out cheerfully, rain hissing against the metal shield above them. "Mine's not, basic math." A smaller reptilian being with amber eyes peered up at him curiously. "How did you know to shield from the precipitation?" it asked in soft, hissing tones. "Same way I know not to stick my hand in a plasma conduit," Angie replied, studying the storm's patterns. "It smells wrong, it looks wrong, it probably is wrong." The third alien was bulky and crustacean-like, its mottled brown shell gleaming wetly. It remained silent, but Christian noticed its small black eyes never left him and Angie, calculating. The fourth figure was clearly another researcher, though Christian couldn't immediately identify its species through its protective gear. They made it to the shelter of a rocky overhang just as the storm intensified. The acid rain hammered against stone with a sound like breaking glass, and the air crackled with energy that made their hair stand on end. "Fascinating," the avian researcher muttered, watching the storm through narrowed eyes. "The ionic composition suggests a deliberately engineered atmospheric disturbance." "Engineered?" Angie raised an eyebrow, settling cross-legged on the stone floor. "By who?" The avian's crest flattened slightly. "An excellent question, one we were investigating when your primitive navigation systems led us into collision." Christian's grin widened. "Primitive enough to pull you out of that storm before it dissolved you. I'll take primitive and alive over advanced and dead any day." The small reptilian's tail flicked with what might have been amusement. "Your survival instincts are remarkable for such a young species." "Earth's a tough teacher," Christian said, settling beside Angie as the storm raged outside. He tapped his fingers against his knee, already planning their next move. "You learn fast or you don't learn at all." As if to emphasize his point, something roared in the distance, a sound like thunder given voice and malice. The avian researcher's feathers ruffled with anxiety. "The predators will emerge once the storm passes," it said. "We must reach the research station before—" "Research station's gone," Angie interrupted quietly. She'd been studying the horizon through a gap in the rocks. "I can see the smoke from here, whatever hit you got them to." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Finally, the young reptilian spoke up. "Then what do we do?" Christian stood, dusting off his hands. "We survive. That's what humans do best." He looked out at the alien landscape, his scarred face thoughtful. "And lucky for you, we're really, really good at it." The storm began to abate as the group settled in for the night, but Christian could see the doubt in the aliens' eyes. They thought humans were soft, unprepared for a world like this. By morning, he intended to change their minds. As violet lightning illuminated the twisted spires of Kithara 7, Christian caught Angie's eye and saw his own determination reflected there. They'd crashed on a Deathworld with 4 alien researchers who thought humanity was weak. Time to prove them wrong. Dawn on Kithara 7 brought no sun, only a gradual lightening of the bruised sky from deep purple to sickly yellow. The storm had passed, leaving the air thick with ozone and the acrid smell of dissolved rock. Christian stood at the edge of their shelter, studying the terrain ahead while Angie checked their salvaged supplies. "Canyon runs east for about 3 clicks," she reported, shouldering a pack cobbled together from shuttle materials. "Rocky walls, plenty of cover, but—" She paused, rubbing her thumb against her fingers. "Something's off about the shadows." The avian researcher, who had introduced himself as Kethvar during the night, stretched his iridescent wings with obvious skepticism. "Your primitive senses detect what our instruments cannot?" "My primitive senses kept me alive on a dozen worlds before this one," Angie replied evenly. She pointed toward the canyon mouth, where strange glowing lichen clung to the rock walls in patches. "See how the lichen grows? It's following heat signatures. Something big moves through there regularly." The young reptilian Sisk flicked his tail nervously. "Predators?" "Count on it," Christian said, checking the improvised weapons he'd crafted from shuttle debris. A plasma cutter rewired into a handheld torch, metal strips sharpened to points, emergency cable rigged as snares. "But that's their home turf. We're going to make it ours." Kethvar's yellow eyes narrowed. "How does your species propose to claim territory from apex predators?" Christian's grin was sharp as the weapons in his hands. "Same way we always have. We cheat." The canyon walls rose 60 meters on either side, carved from black volcanic rock that seemed to absorb light. The glowing lichen provided an eerie blue-green illumination, pulsing gently in response to their footsteps. Christian led the group forward, but his real attention was on the environment itself. The wind patterns Angie had identified, the way sound echoed off the walls, the places where shadows fell wrong. They were 20 minutes into the canyon when the first attack came. A flash of movement high above, barely visible against the dark stone. Christian's hand shot out, grabbing Sisk and pulling the small reptilian against the wall, just as something massive dropped from a ledge. The creature hit the canyon floor with an impact that sent vibrations through the stone, 15 feet of sleek predator with adaptive camouflage that had made it nearly invisible until the moment it struck. "Scatter!" Christian shouted, but the alien researchers froze in terror as red eyes the size of dinner plates fixed on them. The megafauna's spine-covered hide rippled as it oriented on the smallest target, Sisk. That's when Angie's weeks of observation paid off. She'd noticed the wind patterns, the way air moved through the canyon in predictable currents. As the beast lunged forward, she triggered one of Christian's improvised devices, a compressed air canister from their life support system, rigged to spray in the predator's path. The creature hit the chemical cloud and reeled back, its adaptive camouflage flickering as its nervous system struggled to process the foreign compounds. In that moment of confusion, Christian struck. The plasma torch wasn't designed as a weapon, but superheated plasma didn't care about design specifications. Christian rolled under the creature's wild swipe and dragged the improvised blade across its softer underbelly. Alien blood, thick and dark, splattered across the canyon floor. The megafauna roared, a sound like an avalanche given voice, and thrashed wildly before collapsing. But Christian was already moving, his sharp eyes scanning the walls above. "That was the scout," he said grimly. "Pack hunters, where there's one." A chorus of roars echoed from deeper in the canyon, growing closer. "This is madness," Kethvar hissed, his crest flaring with panic. "We should retreat to more defensible terrain." "No defensible terrain," Angie replied, already setting up Christian's next surprise. "But they're following scent markers, territorial boundaries. We can use that." What followed was a masterclass in human ingenuity under pressure. Christian had studied the canyon during their approach, identifying choke points and natural funnels. Now he put that knowledge to work, using the emergency cable to rig a series of snares at ankle height across the narrowest part of the passage. Angie, meanwhile, had been analyzing the predator's behavior patterns. "They hunt in threes," she told the group as they worked. "Alpha leads, 2 flankers. The alpha will test defenses while the flankers circle for position." When the next attack came, they were ready. The alpha megafauna charged through the canyon with the confidence of an apex predator, its spine-covered hide rippling with adaptive camouflage. It hit Christian's snare at full speed and went down hard, crashing into the canyon wall with enough force to crack stone. The flankers, following their pack leader, ran straight into the killing field Christian had prepared. Sharpened metal strips, angled to catch creatures moving at speed, punched through the gaps in their armor plating. One went down immediately. The other, wounded and enraged, turned toward the nearest target, Kethvar. The avian researcher stood frozen as 15 feet of wounded predator bore down on him. But Sisk, the young reptilian, proved that courage wasn't exclusively human. He grabbed one of Christian's plasma-heated metal stakes and drove it deep into the creature's flank, buying precious seconds. Christian finished the job with ruthless efficiency, his improvised torch finding the creature's throat. As alien blood steamed in the canyon air, he turned to find 4 alien researchers staring at him with something approaching awe. "Impossible," Kethvar whispered, his melodic voice shaken. "How did you predict their attack patterns?" "Same way Angie predicted the storm," Christian replied, wiping blood from his scarred face. "We paid attention. On Earth, if you don't read the signs, you don't survive long enough to reproduce." Sisk's amber eyes were wide with curiosity. "Your world forged such survival instincts in all your kind?" Angie laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Christians from the easy part of Earth. You should meet the folks from the Australian outback." As they picked their way through the aftermath of the battle, the crustacean researcher, who had given his name as Thexmar, spoke for the first time since the crash. "Your species adapts quickly to hostile environments," he said, his gravelly voice carefully neutral, perhaps too quickly. Something in his tone made Christian's eyes narrow, but before he could respond, Angie called out from ahead. "Christian, you need to see this." At the far end of the canyon, half hidden by fallen rocks and twisted metal, the curved wall of an ancient structure emerged from the stone. Symbols covered its surface, not carved but somehow grown into the material itself, pulsing with the same bioluminescent glow as the canyon lichen. "Now that," Christian said, his grin returning as he studied the alien architecture, "is interesting." Kethvar's scientific training overcame his lingering shock. The energy patterns are consistent with our preliminary readings. This structure predates any known civilization in this sector. "And it's pointing us somewhere," Angie added, tracing the flow of symbols with her finger. The patterns seemed to converge on a specific direction, deeper into the planet's hostile interior. As they prepared to investigate further, Christian caught Thexmar watching him with those small, calculating eyes. The crustacean's claws clicked softly, a sound Christian was beginning to recognize as a sign of agitation. "Problem?" Christian asked directly. No problem, Thexmar replied, but his gaze never wavered. I merely wonder what other capabilities your species might reveal under pressure. The words carried an undertone that made Christian's fingers tap against his thigh, his own tell when planning strategy. Around them, the canyon shadows seemed to deepen, and the distant sound of predators echoed off the walls. Whatever secrets Kithara 7 was hiding, Christian suspected their alien companions weren't the only ones with hidden agendas. The ancient structure's interior felt wrong in ways that made the teeth ache and the skin crawl. Bioluminescent veins pulsed through walls that seemed more grown than built, casting shifting shadows that moved independently of their light sources. Christian led the group deeper into the complex, his improvised plasma torch held ready, while Angie documented everything with a salvaged recording device. The architecture suggests a civilization that merged organic and technological elements, Kethvar observed, his scientific curiosity overcoming his earlier skepticism. His yellow eyes tracked the energy patterns flowing through the walls. But the power signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Sisk pressed close to the walls, his amber eyes wide with wonder. The material responds to proximity, he whispered, watching as symbols brightened when he approached. It's scanning us. Scanning for what? Angie asked, but her attention was fixed on something else, the way the passages were arranged, the flow of energy through the structure. This isn't random. There's a pattern here, like, she paused, rubbing her thumb against her fingers as she processed the information, like a map. Christian studied the walls more carefully, noting how certain symbols repeated in specific sequences. His background in navigation systems kicked in, pattern recognition trained by years of reading stellar charts and flight paths. She's right. Look at the convergence points. What followed was 2 hours of careful exploration and analysis. Christian's persistence in decoding the symbol patterns began to pay off as he identified recurring motifs, directional indicators, distance markers, even what appeared to be hazard warnings. The avian researcher watched with growing grudging respect as the human pilot worked through problems that had stymied their initial survey team. Remarkable, Kethvar admitted, his melodic voice carrying a note of surprise. Your pattern recognition capabilities exceed our estimates of human cognitive ability. We're full of surprises, Christian replied, not looking up from the wall he was studying. His fingers traced a particularly complex symbol cluster. And this one's a big one. I think I've found what you were looking for. The symbol array he decoded showed a three-dimensional map of the planet's interior, with energy flows connecting a network of similar structures. But the largest concentration of symbols pointed to a single location, a massive complex buried deep beneath the planet's surface. A control hub, Angie breathed, studying the translation. The whole planet's connected to it. But Thexmar stepped forward, his bulky frame blocking their view of the symbols. Your interpretation is premature, he said, his gravelly voice carrying an edge of authority. Human cognitive patterns lack the sophistication to properly analyze xenoarchaeological data. Maybe, Christian said, his quick grin flashing despite the tension, but human cognitive patterns just figured out where your survey team should have been looking in the first place. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Kethvar's crest flattened against his skull as he processed the revelation that their months of careful study had been surpassed by a crashed human pilot in a matter of hours. This is precisely what concerns me, Thexmar continued, his claws clicking in agitation. Human adaptation rates are unnatural. Your species exhibits capabilities that suggest artificial enhancement or genetic manipulation. Or, Angie said quietly, her hazel eyes fixed on the crustacean researcher, we come from a world that kills anything slow to adapt. Before Thexmar could respond, Sisk's excited hiss drew their attention. The young reptilian had wandered deeper into the chamber and was standing before a section of wall that pulsed with brighter energy. The patterns here are different, he called out, more complex, like they're responding to multiple inputs. Christian joined him, noting immediately how the symbols shifted as he approached. But there was something else, a subsonic vibration that seemed to resonate in his bones, carrying information just below the threshold of conscious perception. It's not just mapping the network, he realized. It's monitoring it. These symbols are status reports. Angie moved to another section of the active wall, her analytical mind working to correlate the data streams. Most of the network shows green, or whatever passes for green in this system. But there are red zones, dead zones. The survey station, Kethvar said grimly. We noted similar energy fluctuations before the attack. Attack? Christian's fingers stopped their restless tapping. You said equipment failure. The avian researcher's feathers ruffled with embarrassment. We simplified the truth. The station was destroyed by unknown forces, systematically dismantled with surgical precision. And you didn't think that was worth mentioning when we crashed on the same planet? Angie's voice carried a dangerous edge. Human emotional volatility suggested disclosure would impair group cohesion, Thexmar interjected. Your species' tendency toward panic responses. Our species' tendency, Christian interrupted, his green eyes hard, is to solve problems, can't solve what we don't know about. The tension in the chamber was thick enough to cut when the sound came. A low, rhythmic thrumming that seemed to emerge from the walls themselves. The bioluminescent patterns began pulsing faster, and the subsonic vibration increased until they could all feel it in their chests. The network's responding to something, Angie said, her voice tight with concentration. Massive energy spike from the control hub. On the walls around them, the status displays shifted. Red zones appeared and disappeared like a spreading infection, tracking across the planet's surface in patterns that suggested purpose rather than random failure. It's hunting, Christian realized. The network isn't just monitoring, it's actively seeking something. Kethvar's scientific training warred with growing fear, but seeking what? The answer came from an unexpected source. Deep in the translated data streams, Angie found reference patterns that made her blood run cold. Off-worlders, she whispered. It's hunting off-worlders. This whole planet is one massive defense system. The implications hit them like a physical blow. Every attack, every environmental hazard, every predator encounter, all of it coordinated by an ancient network designed to eliminate alien visitors. We have to reach the control hub, Christian said, his jaw set with determination. Shut it down. Impossible, Thexmar said immediately. The hub is buried kilometers beneath the surface, protected by layers of automated defenses. No expedition has ever penetrated such depths. Then we'll be the first, Christian replied. His scarred face was calm, but his fingers drummed against his thigh with increasing tempo. Because the alternative is dying here. Kethvar studied the human pilot with new eyes, noting the way Christian's mind immediately shifted from analysis to action, from understanding the problem to solving it. Your species truly believes any obstacle can be overcome? Not any obstacle, Angie corrected, checking their supplies with practiced efficiency, but we won't know which ones until we try. As they prepared to leave the ancient structure, Christian noticed Thexmar hanging back, his bulky form hunched in what might have been thought. The crustacean's small eyes were fixed on the wall displays, and his claws clicked in a pattern that seemed almost like communication. Something wrong? Christian asked. Nothing wrong, Thexmar replied quickly. I am merely concerned about the wisdom of this course of action. Perhaps we should consider alternatives. Like what? Signal for rescue. Wait for properly equipped teams to investigate. Christian's grin was sharp and entirely without humor. How long you think we'd last while waiting? The question hung in the air as they made their way back through the structure's organic corridors. Behind them, the bioluminescent patterns continued their frantic pulsing, and the subsonic thrumming grew stronger. Somewhere in the depths of Kithara 7, an ancient intelligence had noticed their presence, and it was not pleased. As they emerged into the alien daylight, Christian caught sight of movement on the distant ridges, shapes that might have been rocks but moved too purposefully to be natural formations. The planet's defenses were mobilizing. Time to go, he said quietly. But as they set off toward the coordinates Christian had decoded, none of them noticed Thexmar's claws tap out a specific sequence against his shell, a sequence that matched the patterns they'd observed in the ancient structure's communication systems. The hunt was beginning in earnest. The jungle that sprawled beyond the canyon was a fever dream of evolution gone mad. Twisted trees reached toward the sickly sky with branches that dripped caustic sap, their bark scarred by the claws of countless predators. Pools of bubbling liquid dotted the forest floor, releasing vapors that made the air shimmer with heat and toxicity. The very air felt thick enough to chew, laden with spores and chemical traces that spoke of an ecosystem designed by malevolence. Christian led the group through this biological minefield with the cautious precision of a man who understood that on a Deathworld, every step could be your last. Behind him, Angie read the jungle's patterns with eyes that had learned to see death in the way shadows fell and safety in the spaces where no life grew. "Pheromone trails," she murmured, kneeling beside a tree whose base was marked with deep gouges. "Multiple species, but they're avoiding each other. Territory markers." Kethvar's scientific curiosity warred with obvious unease as his yellow eyes tracked movement in the canopy above. The biodiversity is extraordinary, predator saturation rates that should theoretically be unsustainable. "Theory and practice are different things out here," Christian replied, helping Sisk navigate around a pool that glowed with internal phosphorescence. "On Earth, we learned that survival isn't about what should work, it's about what does work." The young reptilian's tail flicked nervously as something roared in the distance. "Your world produced such diversity of threats? Australia alone would give this place a run for its money," Angie said with dark humor. "At least here the spiders are only the size of your head." They'd been traveling for 3 hours when the mist began to thicken. What had started as wisps of vapor between the trees became a dense fog that reduced visibility to mere meters. Christian called a halt, every instinct screaming danger. "This isn't natural weather," he said, studying the way the mist moved. "Too uniform, too thick. Something's generating it." Angie pressed her palm against a nearby tree, feeling the vibrations that traveled through the root system. "The jungle's gone quiet. No insect sounds, no small animal movement. Everything's hiding." "Or being told to hide," Christian added grimly. That's when the attack came. It started with a sound like branches breaking, but too rhythmic, too purposeful. Then shadows moved within the mist, massive shapes that flowed between the trees with predatory grace. The megafauna that emerged from the fog were different from the canyon hunters, smaller but more numerous, their adaptive hides shifting to match the dappled light of the jungle floor. The pack hit them from 3 directions simultaneously. "Scatter!" Christian shouted, but the ambush was too well coordinated. The aliens found themselves separated, each facing their own nightmare of teeth and claws. Kethvar's sharp talons served him well in close combat, but his avian bones weren't built for the kind of punishment these predators could dish out. Sisk's small size made him elusive, but also made him a priority target for creatures that saw him as easy prey. It was Thexmar who surprised everyone. The bulky crustacean moved with unexpected speed, his heavy claws proving devastatingly effective against predators adapted to fight smaller, more agile prey. But even his armored shell couldn't stand up to sustained assault from multiple attackers. That's when Angie took command. "Christian, the pheromone trails," she called out, dodging a swipe from claws the length of her forearm. "They're following scent markers." Understanding flashed in Christian's green eyes. He pulled a chemical heating pack from their supplies and slammed it against a tree marked with territorial scars. The reaction produced a cloud of synthetic pheromones that sent the attacking predators into confusion. But Angie was already moving to the next phase of her improvised defense. She'd studied the jungle's ecosystem during their approach, noting which plants thrived and which areas remained barren. Now she put that knowledge to work. "The blue vines," she shouted, grabbing a length of rope-like growth from a nearby tree. "They're acidic to megafauna, natural deterrent." What followed was a masterclass in adaptive thinking under pressure. While Christian used his piloting skills to navigate the 3-dimensional battlefield of the jungle canopy, Angie turned the environment itself into a weapon. The blue vines, when crushed and spread, created barriers that the predators wouldn't cross. Certain fungal growths, when disturbed, released spores that interfered with the creature's camouflage abilities. But it was the partnership between human and alien that truly turned the tide. Sisk's knowledge of reptilian predator behavior helped them predict attack patterns, while Kethvar's understanding of pack dynamics allowed them to identify the alpha and target it specifically. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes, but it changed everything. When the mist finally cleared, 5 megafauna lay dead or dying among the twisted trees. The surviving members of the pack had melted back into the jungle, presumably to report to whatever intelligence coordinated their attacks. "Extraordinary," Kethvar breathed, staring at the improvised battlefield Angie had created. "You transformed a killing ground into a defensive position using only indigenous materials." "That's not the extraordinary part," Angie replied, wiping alien blood from a makeshift spear. "The extraordinary part is that this was their territory, their advantage, and we still won." But it was Sisk who asked the crucial question. How did they coordinate the ambush so precisely? Pack hunters are intelligent, but this level of tactical sophistication suggests external control, Christian finished. He was studying one of the dead predators, noting the small nodule of crystalline material embedded behind its skull. Same as the canyon hunters, something's directing them. Thexmar had been unusually quiet during the aftermath, his small eyes fixed on the crystalline implants Christian had discovered. When he finally spoke, his gravely voice carried a note of reluctant admiration. "Your species' combat adaptability is concerning," he said. "Such rapid innovation under stress suggests evolutionary pressures far beyond normal parameters." "Or maybe," Christian said, his scarred face thoughtful, "we just come from a world that doesn't coddle its children." But as they gathered their gear and prepared to continue toward the control hub, Christian noticed something troubling. The disagreement between him and Kethvar over their next route had escalated into something approaching a confrontation, with the avian researcher openly questioning human decision-making capabilities. "Your tactical analysis lacks proper consideration of risk factors," Kethvar insisted, his crest flaring with agitation. "A more cautious approach would yield superior survival probability." "Cautious approach got your survey team killed," Christian replied bluntly. "Sometimes you have to take risks to survive." The tension might have escalated further, but Angie stepped between them with the calm authority of someone who'd spent years managing volatile situations. "We're all stressed," she said simply. "We're all scared, and we're all trying to stay alive on a planet that wants us dead. Fighting each other just makes its job easier." Her words carried weight because they'd all seen what she could do under pressure. When the chips were down and death came calling, Angie had taken command and kept them alive. That kind of proven competence spoke louder than any argument. Kethvar's feathers settled slowly. "You are correct. Emotional responses impair logical analysis." "Emotion's not the problem," Christian said, extending his hand to the avian researcher. "Fear is natural. It's what you do with the fear that matters." As they shook hands, or the alien equivalent, Sisk made another discovery that changed their understanding of the situation. Hidden beneath fallen logs and camouflaging vegetation, he found the entrance to an underground complex. "The symbols match those from the derelict structure," he reported excitedly. "This is part of the same network." Angie studied the entrance with her analytical eye, noting the way the jungle seemed to avoid the immediate area. "And it's been recently active. Look at the growth patterns. Something's been coming and going through here." "Something big," Christian added, examining claw marks on the metal framework, "or a lot of something small." As they prepared to descend into the underground complex, Christian caught Thexmar making what looked like adjustments to his communication equipment. The crustacean's claws moved with the precise patterns they'd observed in the ancient structure, and for a moment the device emitted a subsonic pulse that felt familiar. "Equipment check?" Christian asked casually. "Minor calibration," Thexmar replied, but his small eyes didn't meet Christian's gaze. "The jungle's electromagnetic field interferes with proper function." The lie was smooth, professional, and completely unconvincing to someone with Christian's experience reading people under stress. But he filed the information away for later use, focusing instead on the immediate problem of exploring an active alien facility while surrounded by hostile predators. As they descended into the darkness below, Christian couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The only question was whether it had been set by the planet's ancient defenses or by someone in their own group. The underground complex stretched away into darkness like the arteries of some vast sleeping beast. Bioluminescent conduits pulsed along the walls in rhythmic patterns that seemed almost like a heartbeat, casting dancing shadows that made depth perception a constant challenge. The air itself hummed with energy, thick with ozone and the metallic taste of active electronics. Christian led the group deeper into the facility, his improvised plasma torch providing additional light but revealing more questions than answers. The architecture was clearly from the same civilization that had built the surface structure, but this was different, more purposeful, more alive. Control surfaces lined the walls, their alien interfaces responding to proximity with cascades of symbols and energy displays. The power generation systems are still active, Kethvar observed, his scientific training overcoming his earlier skepticism about human abilities. After millennia of abandonment, such sustained operation is theoretically— "Don't say it," Angie warned, her hazel eyes fixed on a particularly complex display panel. "We've had enough theory for one day." But it was Sisk who made the discovery that changed everything. The young reptilian had been examining what appeared to be a data storage matrix when the wall suddenly came alive, projecting holographic displays that filled the chamber with swirling information streams. "It's responding to my bioelectrical field," he said wonderingly, his amber eyes wide as data cascaded around him. "The system is designed to interface with organic neural patterns." Christian studied the holographic displays with the pattern recognition skills that had served him well in the surface structure. But these patterns were different, more complex, layered with meaning that spoke of purpose and intelligence and something else that made his skin crawl. It's not just data storage, he realized. It's a command center, a nerve hub for something much larger. Angie moved to another interface, her analytical mind working to correlate the information streams. The displays responded to her presence by shifting to what appeared to be a planetary overview. Kithara 7 rendered in three-dimensional detail with energy networks spanning its entire surface. "Defense grid," she breathed, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. "The whole planet is one massive defensive installation." The holographic display zoomed in on specific locations, revealing the true scale of the ancient defense grid. Kithara 7 wasn't just a planet, it was a weapon, a vast, interconnected system designed to exterminate any off-worlders who dared to trespass. Every environmental hazard, every monstrous predator, every seemingly random attack they had faced was a calculated maneuver by this ancient planet-wide intelligence. Christian, Angie, Kethvar, Sisk, and even the inscrutable Thexmar stood in the heart of this subterranean nerve center. The pulsing bioluminescent conduits around them, a stark reminder of the immense power they faced. "This is it," Christian said, his voice low, a grim determination etched on his scarred face. "The control hub, we shut it down or we die trying." Thexmar, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke, his gravelly voice devoid of its usual condescension. "The system is deeply integrated. A simple shutdown will be impossible. It will have fail-safes, redundant systems, and likely a core intelligence that will resist any attempt to neutralize it." "Then we'll find its core," Angie countered, her fingers already dancing across a nearby interface, attempting to decipher the alien script. "Every system has a weakness. We just need to find Kithara 7's. As if in response to their defiance, the hum in the chamber intensified, and new holographic projections flickered into existence. These weren't maps or status reports, but schematics of the complex itself, highlighting pathways and defensive measures. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown by the ancient intelligence. "It's showing us the way," Sisk whispered, his amber eyes wide. "Or perhaps it's showing us our inevitable demise." Christian's grin was a thin line. "Either way, we're going. Kethvar, Sisk, you're with Angie. See if you can find a way to overload a secondary power conduit or distract some of its defenses. Thexmar, you're with me. Your knowledge of their tech might give us an edge at the core." The avian researcher Kethvar ruffled his feathers. My expertise is in xenolinguistics and energy patterns, not sabotage. You're a quick study, Christian said, already moving towards one of the highlighted passages, and you've seen what happens when we don't adapt. Let's go. The journey through the control hub was a descent into a living labyrinth. The bioluminescent conduits pulsed with increasing urgency, and the air grew heavy with a sense of watchful malevolence. Automated defenses, previously dormant, now activated. Energy barriers flickered into existence, blocking pathways, and crystalline constructs emerged from the walls, firing concentrated energy blasts. Christian and Thexmar moved with a synchronized efficiency born of shared peril. Thexmar, despite his earlier reservations, proved invaluable. His understanding of the ancient technology allowed him to bypass some of the simpler security measures, or at least identify their weak points. Christian, with his raw human ingenuity, found ways to exploit those weaknesses, using salvaged shuttle components to short-circuit energy conduits or create diversions. This system is designed to learn, Thexmar grunted, his claws clicking as he worked on a complex lock. It adapts to our methods. Good, Christian replied, ducking under a sweeping energy beam. So do we. Meanwhile, Angie, Kethvar, and Sisk faced their own challenges. They navigated a parallel set of passages, their objective to create a diversion that would draw the system's attention away from Christian and Thexmar. Angie, with her uncanny ability to read environmental patterns, identified a series of conduits that seemed to regulate the planet's atmospheric control. If we can disrupt the atmospheric regulators, Angie explained, pointing to a complex schematic on a holographic display, it might force the system to reallocate resources, creating a window for Christian. Kethvar, initially hesitant, found himself drawn into the challenge. His knowledge of energy patterns allowed him to identify the precise frequency needed to overload the regulators without causing a catastrophic system failure. Sisk, with his small size and agility, was able to squeeze through narrow maintenance shafts, reaching critical access points that the others couldn't. "This is exhilarating," Sisk hissed, his tail flicking with excitement as he bypassed a security panel. "My people have never faced such a complex puzzle." As they worked, the planet itself seemed to groan in protest. The thrumming intensified, and the very ground beneath their feet vibrated. On the holographic displays, new red zones flared, indicating the system's growing awareness of their intrusion. Back with Christian and Thexmar, they reached a massive reinforced door, pulsing with an ominous red glow. This was clearly the entrance to the core. "This is a primary defense," Thexmar said, his voice strained. "It will be nearly impenetrable." "Nearly isn't good enough," Christian countered, examining the door's structure. It was made of the same organic technological material as the walls, but thicker, denser. He noticed a faint shimmer around the edges, indicating an active energy shield. "The shield is drawing power from the main conduits," Thexmar observed, pointing to a series of thick cables embedded in the floor. "If we could sever them—" "Too thick," Christian said, touching the cables. "My plasma torch won't cut through that, not without overloading it." Suddenly, a distant explosion rattled the entire complex. On a nearby holographic display, a section of the atmospheric grid flared bright red, then went dark. "Angie!" Christian breathed, a surge of pride mixed with concern. "She did it!" The explosion created a momentary power fluctuation throughout the complex. The energy shield around the core door flickered, momentarily weakening. "Now!" Thexmar shouted, his claws already working on a nearby console. "The system is diverting power. We have a window." Christian didn't hesitate. He thrust his plasma torch into the weakened shield, pushing it to its absolute limit. The air crackled with ozone, and the torch shrieked in protest, but the shield began to give way, burning through with agonizing slowness. Just as the torch sputtered and died, the shield collapsed, revealing the massive reinforced door. "It's still too thick to cut through," Christian said, panting as he examined the door, "but the energy surge might have affected its structural integrity." Thexmar, meanwhile, had accessed a console that controlled the door's locking mechanism. "The primary lock is still active, but the power fluctuation has created a momentary vulnerability in its bypass sequence." He worked with furious speed, his claws a blur across the alien interface. I can attempt to force it, but it will require a massive energy surge and it will be unstable. Do it, Christian ordered, already bracing himself. With a final desperate series of clicks, Thexmar triggered the bypass. The reinforced door groaned, then shrieked as internal mechanisms tore themselves apart. Sparks flew, and the air filled with the smell of burning metal and ozone. With a final deafening clang, the massive door swung inward, revealing the core chamber. The chamber was vast, a cavern of pulsing light and humming energy. At its center, a colossal crystalline structure pulsed with an inner light, radiating power throughout the entire planet. This was the heart of Cathara 7's defense system, the ancient intelligence itself. But it wasn't empty. Standing before the crystal, bathed in its eerie glow, were figures. Not the megafauna, but beings of pure energy, shimmering and indistinct, their forms shifting like heat haze. They were the guardians, the manifestations of the ancient intelligence. Sentinels, Thexmar whispered, his voice filled with a fear Christian hadn't heard before. They are the system's final defense, pure energy constructs impervious to conventional weapons. We'll see about that, Christian muttered, grabbing a handful of the emergency cable he'd used for snares. He looked at Thexmar. Can you overload that thing from here? Thexmar's small eyes widened. It would require direct interface with the core and a complete reversal of its energy flow. It would be suicidal. Good, Christian said, a grim smile on his face. Then let's go. As they stepped into the core chamber, the sentinels turned, their forms solidifying into menacing shapes. They moved with impossible speed, their energy blasts tearing through the air. Christian, relying on his instincts and years of evading death, dodged and weaved, drawing the sentinels' attention while Thexmar moved towards the core. The crustacean researcher, surprisingly agile for his bulk, scrambled onto a raised platform near the crystalline core. He began working frantically, his claws a blur as he attempted to interface with the ancient intelligence. The sentinels, recognizing the threat, shifted their focus, but Christian was a whirlwind of motion, using the chamber's complex architecture to his advantage, drawing their fire, creating diversions. He was just a human, with improvised weapons and a will to survive against beings of pure energy. But he was also a product of Earth, a world that had forged its inhabitants in the crucible of constant threat. He knew how to fight dirty, how to exploit every weakness, how to never give up. One sentinel lunged, its energy blade aimed at his chest. Christian twisted, using the emergency cable to snag its arm, pulling it off balance. He then slammed a salvaged metal plate into its chest, not expecting to harm it, but to create a momentary disruption. The sentinel shimmered, its form flickering. "Thexmar, how much longer?" Christian yelled, rolling away from another attack. "Almost there," Thexmar shouted back, sweat beading on his shell. "The system is resisting. It's trying to purge me." Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a section of the chamber wall exploded inward. Angie, Kethvar, and Sisk burst through, their faces grim but determined. "Diversion successful," Angie yelled, her eyes scanning the chaotic scene. "But the system's rerouting power. We don't have much time." Kethvar, seeing Thexmar struggling at the core, instinctively moved to assist. His knowledge of energy patterns, combined with Thexmar's understanding of the system's architecture, allowed them to work with incredible speed. Sisk, meanwhile, used his agility to distract the remaining sentinels, drawing their fire away from the two researchers. Christian, seeing his teammates engaged, focused on the last remaining sentinel. It was the largest, its energy form pulsing with malevolent power. He knew he couldn't defeat it, but he could buy time. He charged, a primal roar tearing from his throat, a testament to the raw, unyielding spirit of humanity. The sentinel met his charge, its energy blade arcing towards him. Christian didn't dodge. Instead, he twisted, allowing the blade to graze his side, a searing pain blooming across his ribs. But in that same motion, he unleashed his final desperate gambit. He had rigged a small, highly volatile power cell from the shuttle to explode on impact. With a desperate lunge, he slammed it into the sentinel's chest. The explosion was blinding, concussive. The sentinel shrieked, its energy form dissolving into nothingness. Christian was thrown backward, slamming against the wall, pain lancing through his entire body. But he saw it. The last sentinel was gone. "Now, Thexmar," he gasped, his vision blurring. With a final triumphant click, Thexmar completed the bypass. The crystalline core at the center of the chamber flared with an intense, blinding light, then began to dim, its vibrant colors fading to a dull, lifeless gray. The humming ceased, and the oppressive sense of malevolence lifted. Silence fell, broken only by their ragged breaths. Kithara 7's ancient defense system was dead. Angie rushed to Christian's side, her face pale with concern. "Christian, are you all right?" He managed a weak grin. "Just a scratch. You guys made it." Kethvar and Sisk joined them, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and awe. The Smar, however, remained by the now dormant core, his small eyes fixed on its lifeless form. "It is done," he said, his voice unusually soft. "The planet is quiet." The journey back to the surface was less perilous, but no less arduous. The megafauna, no longer controlled by the ancient intelligence, had retreated, their pack dynamics disrupted. The environmental hazards, while still present, no longer felt actively hostile. They were just natural. When they finally emerged from the underground complex, the sickly yellow sky of Kithara 7 seemed almost welcoming. The air, though still acrid, no longer felt like a weapon. "What now?" Sisk asked, looking around the desolate landscape. "Now," Christian said, leaning heavily on Angie, "we signal for rescue, and then we tell your people what we found." Days later, a rescue vessel from the Alien Research Consortium arrived. Its advanced sensors had detected the sudden cessation of the planet's defense grid and a faint, human-origin distress beacon. The alien crew, composed of various species, eyed the battered human and his alien companions with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. They had heard the legends of Kithara 7, the Deathworld, and the countless expeditions that had vanished without a trace. Christian, though still recovering from his injuries, stood tall as the lead alien researcher, a multi-limbed being named Xylos, approached. "We received your distress signal," Xylos said, its voice a series of clicks and whistles, "and detected the neutralization of the planetary defense system. We are intrigued." "We found the control hub," Christian explained, his voice raspy, "and we shut it down. This planet was a weapon designed by an ancient civilization to keep off-worlders out." Xylos's many eyes widened. "Impossible. Such a system would require a level of technological sophistication beyond anything in our current understanding." "Tell that to the giant energy constructs that tried to kill us," Angie interjected, a wry smile on her face. Kethvar stepped forward, his feathers still slightly ruffled but his voice firm. "The humans speak the truth. Their ingenuity, their adaptability, it allowed us to achieve what our combined scientific efforts could not." Sisk nodded vigorously. "They are truly the apex species of their death world." Thexmar surprisingly corroborated their story, detailing the intricacies of the ancient system and the methods Christian and Angie had employed to dismantle it. His earlier suspicion had been replaced by a grudging, almost reverent respect. "Their methods were unconventional," Thexmar admitted, "but undeniably effective. Their species possesses a unique capacity for rapid problem-solving under extreme duress." Xylos listened, its limbs twitching with what Christian recognized as a mixture of shock and profound reevaluation. The prevailing galactic consensus was that humanity, a relatively young species from a single unremarkable world, was too primitive, too emotional, too fragile for the rigors of deep space. Kithara 7 had just shattered that notion. As Christian, Angie, Kethvar, Sisk, and Thexmar boarded the rescue vessel, the battered shuttle Meridian remained on the ash-gray plains, a testament to human resilience. Kithara 7, once a death world, was now merely a planet, its ancient secrets laid bare. The journey home was long, filled with debriefings and medical examinations. Christian and Angie became minor celebrities within the consortium, their story spreading like wildfire. But for them, the real victory wasn't the fame, but the quiet understanding that had grown between them and their alien companions. Kethvar, once condescending, now sought out Christian and Angie for their insights on problem-solving. Sisk, the curious reptilian, became a devoted student of human survival techniques, eagerly absorbing every lesson. And Thexmar, the calculating crustacean, surprised everyone by requesting to be assigned to future joint human-alien expeditions, his small eyes now holding a glimmer of something akin to admiration. The incident on Kithara 7 became a turning point. Humanity, once dismissed, was now seen as a valuable if unpredictable ally. Their primitive instincts, forged on a world that demanded constant adaptation, were suddenly recognized as a powerful asset. Christian and Angie, back on a human-friendly world, stood on a balcony overlooking a bustling spaceport. Ships of a dozen species docked and departed, a symphony of alien languages and technologies. "So," Angie said, leaning against the railing, "what's next for the apex species?" Christian grinned, the scar on his face pulling tight. "More Deathworlds, I suppose. Someone's got to show them how it's done." He looked out at the stars, a vast, indifferent canvas. But now humanity wasn't just surviving in it. They were thriving, adapting, and proving that the toughest teachers often forge the strongest students. Earth had been a death world, and it had forged them into something truly remarkable. They were ready for whatever the galaxy threw at them. They always would be.